Ah, wait.
First speaker.
Yeah, me and him are old friends.
When Giuliani comes, because he also has to know civil rights.
If anybody is parked in front of Meat Supreme across the street, please move your car.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I ask you to rise for the invocation. The age of the revisionist is upon us and growing stronger. From the lads of the National Front in England who label the Holocaust a myth, to the author of the ads calling for a debate on the truth of the Holocaust, the ad over which so many college newspaper editors wrestled to print or not to print, to the erstwhile columnist still seeking the Republican nomination for president of Patrick Buchanan. The age of revisionism, or better, the age of denial, is very much with us. The Holocaust? What Holocaust? 6 million? A wild exaggeration. We have seen the shower chambers and the so-called furnaces. Impossible. Friends, that is exactly why we are here, and why we testify to our children and grandchildren, to those Jews who have not yet learned what happened, and to the righteous Gentiles who stand with us. Not only could it happen, it did happen. A cold-blooded decision was taken in a beautiful home by a peaceful sea, by heartless men, to snuff out the lives of an entire people. No one of us would be spared, not the old nor the young. Men, women, and children would be hunted down in every hidden corner, in every part of the world, aided and abetted by men and women from every walk of life, from every level of intellectual achievement and culture. The heinous plan succeeded to a terrible degree. Tonight, 50 years later, we are assembled to recite the names of the towns, home to the best and the beautiful of our people, and to bring the names of our loved ones to our lips. All of them holy, every one sacred, each one a kadosh, for they died al kiddush Hashem, for the sanctification of thy name. Av horachamim, Yivkod barachamim hachasidim v'hayishorim v'hatamimim shemosru nafshom al kedushas Hashem. Father of compassion, recall with compassion the devout, the upright, and the perfect ones who gave their lives for the sanctification of thy name. Let their memories ever be for blessing. Teach us to unite in strength and to respond with vigor whenever we are threatened, whether in our own beautiful America or in Eretz Yisrael. Save us and protect us, O God. For we know that ultimately all blessing, all bracha, flows from thee. And let us say, Amen. Amen. Please be seated.
What a mouse. The blind. The little blind. Yeah. There's another one on this side. Another one with dark hair.
During the Shoah, there were martyrs who bore no arms, and there were others who did resist. After the Shoah, there were those who remained silent, and those who vowed they would never forget and allow the world to forget. For the past decade, I've had the privilege as a second-generation member to work closely with someone who single-handedly has not allowed our community to extinguish the flame and who has been the force behind our annual memorial and raising funds for Yad Vashem. It is my honor as president of Flatbush Park Jewish Center, as a son of Holocaust survivors, and as a friend, to present to Mr. Lake Sultanic this autographed copy of the latest volume by Elie Wiesel in appreciation of his work on behalf of the 6 million. Today, in 1992, we can stand tall and proud when over 50 years later, we can say, Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you very much.
Rudolph Giuliani served as United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York from 1983 to 1989, while spearheading the effort against drug dealers, organized crime, and corruption in city government. As the United States Attorney, Rudolph Giuliani personally argued the government's appeal in the Second District of Court against Bolesłavis Majkowskis, a Latvian who was a mass murderer of Jews in the SS. This was the first case of the application of the Holtzman Amendment. Rudolph Giuliani personally argued in 1986 the case that stripped Karl Linus of citizenship and he was deported to the then USSR. He was the first Nazi deported from New York and he died in prison in Russia. Rudolph Giuliani personally argued the case to close the PLO offices in New York. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to present Mr. Rudolph Giuliani.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very honored to participate with you this evening. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you on such a solemn occasion of Yom Hashoah. But before I begin, I would like to take a personal moment to silently honor the memory of 6 million Jewish people who perished in the Holocaust. And I can't think of any better way to honor them than to just be silent for a moment and remember. Thank you. As I look around this synagogue, I marvel at the deep inner strength and resiliency of the Jewish people in the face of continued anti-Semitic oppression. Throughout history, the proud Jewish people in the state of Israel have been forced to prove their faith and their conviction time and time again. It's time for your character and resourcefulness to stop being tested. But sadly, your fight, our fight, is not over. In the last week alone, anti-Semitic hate mail featuring Adolf Hitler was delivered to 28 Stuyvesant High School students with Jewish-sounding last names. And if that wasn't bad enough, just yesterday, an anti-Semitic message apparently urging death to New York City Jews was discovered in one of the world's best-selling computer software programs. It's hard to make sense of this, and it's hard to understand it. For me, I have a memory, which was like a religious experience. And I'm embarrassed to share it with you, because for each of you, you've had to confront this experience in your life as Jews. I've only had the opportunity to observe it. But I want you to know that even those of us who have only observed this experience, in part share it with you, and it means something to us. I'm speaking of the visit that my wife Donna and I made several years ago to Israel and to Yad Vashem. It was an experience which seared into our consciousness the enormity of the evil which was at the root of the Holocaust. The contemplation of such evil is beyond the comprehension of decent human beings. And at a certain point, you really can't understand it. You can just feel it. It's an emotion, not an intellectual thought. Both of us, Donna and I, left our hour at Yad Vashem different than when we entered. I can't explain it to you. I can only explain to you the emotion and the feeling and the memory that still exists of that experience. Since then, I have many times contemplated why, how this could happen. Could it happen again? Can it be prevented? And during the times that I handled the two cases that were just mentioned of Linus and Maikovsky, who were Nazi butchers, I would go through the evidence in the case, at times very, very late at night. The evidence given by, at certain occasions, survivors who had observed, in the case of Mr. Maikovsky, his personally executing thousands and thousands of people. I would go through that evidence and my mind would go back to Yad Vashem, really looking for an answer. Why? How? Can this really be in human nature? And the only thing that I could bring to my own understanding was that what we were facing was evil. And there isn't very often in life when you get even a glimpse of looking into the face of evil. I have no explanation for it. All I can find is emotion. Deep anger, ultimate sorrow, continuing fear, and then finally, in my own heart, love. Love for those whose lives were cut down. Love for those who had to live their last years, months, and hours in terror. Love for those who couldn't deal with it, and love for those who could. And love for all of you who have survived, or whose parents and grandparents have survived. Maybe the only point that I can offer is that in remembering the 6 million martyrs, and in saying we must never, never forget, you force all of us, Jew and non-Jew, to face evil. And evil must be confronted when it first appears, not when it is beyond control. None of us wants to equate what has happened here in New York last year and this year with the Holocaust, or even with the early days of Nazi Germany. To do so would be a desecration. But placed in its proper context, it cannot be ignored. Last year, there were more anti-Semitic attacks in New York City than ever before in our history. We set a record last year. We set a record for anti-Semitic acts and attacks in the city of New York. Last year on the streets of Brooklyn, to this very day on the streets of Brooklyn, we read literature advocating violence against Jews. Last year there was a pogrom, not in Eastern Europe, but in Brooklyn, seeking out Jews to attack them because they were Jewish. And last year, an innocent young man, Yankel Rosenbaum, was murdered in the streets of Brooklyn, not Eastern Europe, but in the streets of Brooklyn, and he was murdered for one reason and one reason alone, because they were seeking a Jew to kill. It's not politically correct, maybe, to face the truth, but it's politically necessary to face the truth. It does not promote unity to hide the truth when the truth involves the evils of anti-Semitism and hate-induced violence. You know and I know that New York City does not have an exclusive franchise on anti-Semitism and other bigotry. Neo-Nazis, the New Right, fascists, and assorted other hate groups are gaining a foothold throughout the United States, Europe, and the rest of the world. Wherever there is social, civil, economic, and political unrest, there are always bigots pointing the fingers at convenient scapegoats. The people in this synagogue represent the best chance for eradicating anti-Semitism. Together, we must educate the impressionable and enlighten the ignorant. Many of you are Holocaust survivors yourselves, or the children and grandchildren of survivors. If God had a plan for the people of Mill Basin, Bergen Beach, and Georgetown, it was to unite you all in common grief to tell your children, your children's children, and all of us who want to listen, whether we do or we don't, never again. You are the messengers of hope. Never again means speaking up and fighting back at the first display of this sickness, this evil. We cannot hide our heads in the sand. We cannot step back from it. We have to confront it, and we have to face it. And the protection of the law has to be available for all of us. Let me offer one final observation. One observation that I hope can help us emphasize that which unites us. Because in investigating and prosecuting civil rights violations, in handling cases involving Nazis, in handling so many cases involving people who have discriminated against other people, which happens all ways and in all different types, I think one observation that I came to is that bigotry, prejudice, scapegoating, racism is never singularly directed against one group. If you think back, the Nazi hate philosophy focused on Jews, but it included the Orthodox Christians, the nationality-based religions of Eastern Europe, who had to also be slaughtered and wiped out. And it had a full measure of racism as part of the Nazi philosophy. Our own hate philosophies here in America, our own homegrown products, the Ku Klux Klan and the New Right, they focus mostly on blacks, but their violence and hatred has included Jews and Catholics and people they would describe as foreigners of whatever religion. When Sonny Carson was asked during the last mayoral campaign that I participated in whether he hated Jews, he proudly proclaimed, no, he hated all whites. I think he was telling the truth. And in that sickness is really our answer. I've never met, prosecuted, investigated, or heard of a bigot that was solely anti-Semitic, or solely anti-black, or solely anti-Catholic, or solely anti-foreigner. Bigotry Prejudice is a sick, irrational state of mind, and in my view, a serious character and emotional disorder that spreads out across a wide range of groups. You cannot fight it alone. I look forward to a day in New York and in America that when there are anti-Semitic attacks like we've seen in the last year and yesterday and last week, the people that I see on television and the people that I see standing up and condemning it are mostly Christians and blacks, and not necessarily Jews. And when I see attacks on black youngsters in white neighborhoods, I want to see white people standing up and being the first to attack it. Because this is a disease that comes out of a common sickness. Maybe the best way to look at it is that there's a stream of hate and evil. Any form of bigotry contributes to it. Some small, some large. And the haters among us draw from it. The other lesson that I learned from my years as United States Attorney, and then for the brief time that I ran for mayor, was that no matter where you go in this city, you find good people, decent people, honest people, and we, unfortunately, let the worst among us dominate the microphones and the airwaves. We let the Sonny Carsons and the Al Sharptons do too much of the speaking. We have to let the good people and the decent people talk for what they believe and for what they are. I'm here today to remember with you, to say never again with you, and to say to you that your experience, which will never be forgotten, is an experience that affects all of us, not just Jews. And we try to understand and to share it with you. I'm here to say to you that the sacrifice of the 6 million martyrs can only shed light to the extent that we use it as a testament against hatred, and even as a warning against hatred in us. The Jewish religion and law, the Jewish values and traditions, the Jewish experience have made incalculable contributions. It is much of what is good about New York and about America. But if we Jews and non-Jews can remember as we should, then those Jews who maybe contributed the most may well be those 6 million who died, and those of you who survived the Holocaust. Because maybe, just maybe, they can help teach us how to stop hating and to love each other as the children of one God. Hashoah and Shalom, and thank you very much for allowing me to...
Was re-elected in 1989 for a 4-year term as New York City Council President. Most recent achievement is what has been a lifetime of public service. He began as a New York State Assemblyman, served most recently as President of the Borough of Manhattan. Mr. Stein is an outspoken, articulate defender of Jewish causes and of the Jewish people. He has written often and well in defense of the state of Israel. Articles have appeared in the New York Post and elsewhere. Tonight, he rises not only in his role of city ombudsman to give cause before his cross concerns, but to speak for our martyrs who have no voice, and to encourage us in our sacred path. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce to you Mr. Andrew Stein.
Thank you very much. one aspect of the Holocaust that I think we tend to overlook, and I think in many ways it's most important for us as Americans to realize, is what our country and what the great democracies of the West did and did not do. We must remember that the horror of it all was that England closed Palestine in 1939 against the League of Nations mandate and locked in the Jews of Europe with their killers. We, President Roosevelt, the United States, locked the Jews of Europe in with their murderers. The St. Louis is the most famous example, the boat that came here on the shores of the United States and was turned back. That's something that we have not really come to terms with. Hitler did not think that he could get away with exterminating the Jews. He said, here, you take these Jews if you care about them so much. We didn't. We closed our borders, and so did England, and so did the Western world. And that's something that's very painful to think about, but it's something that we can't forget. And we feel relatively comfortable here. Many of us have achieved positions. We feel particularly comfortable in life in New York. But we have to remember that in the end, no one saved the Jews. And that the United States and England went to war not to save the Jews, but to save themselves. And if it was only about saving the Jews, they would have never, ever fought Hitler. What does that tell us? It tells us that as a people, for my children and my grandchildren and their children, that we have to have a strong, independent Israel. In the end, that's all that history has taught us we can count on to save our people. And that's what breaks my heart so much when I see Jews, particularly Jews, very honestly, from Manhattan, the so-called intellectuals, the New York Times, the people from the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side, who are so readily critical of Israel, who follow what the media does, what the networks do, without really thinking. I remember in 1982, going to Lebanon during the war and watching all the broadcasts on television, reading in the paper about the Israeli oppressors, comparing my friend Sharon to Hitler, and all the terrible things that were said about Israel then. But there weren't the facts. The facts were that it was the Palestinians who went into Lebanon and destroyed that beautiful country when they were thrown out of Jordan and murdered in Black September by the king of Jordan. And all the 100,000 killings that went on from the early 70s to the early 80s, and the butcheries by the Syrians and the Palestinians against Christians, they got this much space in the paper. No one cared. No one cared about the Katyusha rockets that came into northern Israel and killed Israeli children. When Israel went to defend itself, all of a sudden the Israelis were the murderers. And I remember going to a town, the Moor, about 4 miles outside of Beirut. And in the broadcast on television 3 days before I left, I think it was ABC, how the Israelis came in and killed all these innocent people. And when I got there and looked for myself, 6 years before that, the PLO had gone in and murdered 6,200 Christians in cold blood. It wasn't in the paper. You couldn't find it. I went back to the clippings of the papers. It was like this much in a couple of the papers. It wasn't never covered. So we have to sift out the truth. And we have to say that the Palestinians have a home.
We're not trying to deny them a home. Their home is Jordan. And that's the history of Palestine. 2/3 of the people are Palestinian. The land, 3/4 of the land mass is Palestinian. They're entitled to their home in Jordan. But the Jews are entitled to that little piece of land which is called Israel, and it's including Judea and Samaria. And I see too readily Jewish friends of mine who don't know the truth say, well, isn't it terrible that Israel won't let the poor Palestinians have their own country? They have no right to Judea and Samaria. It was because the Jordanians attacked Israel in 1967. Israel didn't attack anybody. They were attacked by all these countries. And they were defending themselves. And Jerusalem is always going to be the capital of Israel, and there can be no compromise about that. These are things that Jews have to stand up about. We can't have such self-doubt about ourselves. We have to realize what the history, when you look at these areas, the Palestinians were oppressed under the English, they were oppressed under the Ottomans, they were oppressed under the Jordanians. In Gaza, the Egyptians treated them much, much worse than Israel ever thought about doing. But the world didn't care. And there is a double standard when it comes to Jews. Israel has the highest standard. What other country would have 150 people surrounding her and still be a democracy and still improve the life of the people that they occupy after being attacked? The Palestinians have jobs, they have avocado fields and peach fields where they had nothing. They have electric light. They have things. They have schools that were built that they never had before. Their fellow Arabs treated them like dogs. Israel and the Jews always do better than others in terms of showing humanitarian feelings. But you can't let civil disobedience overtake you, because in the so-called Intifada, if the Israelis didn't maintain order, it would have got out of hand, and it would have never been stopped, and there would have been thousands of people that would have died instead of maintaining some control. So we have to remember, I think, the lessons of the Holocaust is that in the end, we need Israel. In the end, as comfortable as some of us may feel as Americans, that America never would have gone to war to defend the Jews, would have never gone to war to stop the Holocaust, and in fact locked the Jews in with Hitler, and so did the English in Palestine. So I guess my message is that support Israel very strongly. When a Professor Jeffrey speaks up, demand that he be fired, and realize that you should be proud of Israel. You should be proud of being Jews. You should be proud of Israel's record. Too many Jews go around today with their heads down, thinking for some reason that they should be proud of Israel. No country has a better record of democracy, of humanitarian feeling. When I was in Israel 8 months ago, I was so proud to see Falashian kids and Russian Jewish kids who were 5 and 6 years old learning Hebrew together. It was Jews who brought them out of Africa in that great rescue effort, and Jews who will take a Jew from anywhere in the world and offer them a home and help them. So I'm a proud Jew, I know you are, and I think the lesson of the Holocaust is that it can never happen again as long as we depend on ourselves. Another lesson from the 30s and the 40s was that the mainline Jewish organizations did not stand up. They did not yell loud enough. They did not hold people accountable enough. They were so busy courting favor, and I've read so many books on this and studied it. They were so busy courting favor with Roosevelt and the people in the New Deal and trying to be accepted that they didn't speak out when they heard what was going on. And that's why Hitler got away with what he did. He didn't think that he was going to be able to get away with the murdering of the Jews, but he saw that the West didn't really stop him. And the Jewish organizations and the Jewish leadership did not demand that it be stopped with a strong enough voice. And we have to realize, I believe, that the lessons of that period, and realize that God helps those who help themselves, and doubly so for Jews. We have to be strong, we have to be independent, we have to speak with a very clear voice, and we have to be proud, and we have to be vigilant. And that is our legacy for those 6 million people who died. So it can never happen again to our children or our children's children. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Nuremberg, Hallenstow, Gothenburg, Czechoslovakia. Fred Listhouse was born in Poland and was in Siberia until the end of the war. For all those European Jews from cities of Smolstetla who were herded into ghettos, subjected to hunger and disease, and forced to endure the twin horrors of death and deportation. The car, thank, remember. The second candle will be lit. That's will be lit by Mr. and Mrs. Roman Lukowitz, who were in the lagers of Garjisko and Czestochowa. For the billions of Jewish men, women, and children, inmates of the concentration camps and extermination camps, Dachau, Auschwitz, Majdanek, Elmo, Bergen-Belsen, Yachor, Zek, remember. The third candle will be lit by Mrs. Jenny Simpkin and Mr. and Mrs. Moshe. Mrs. Jenny Simpkin, who was born in Poland, she was a nurse with the Jewish partisans. The Jewish resistance fighters and partisans who fought back against the Nazi terror without arms or ammunition in the forests and ghettos to avenge the blood of their brothers and for the sake of Jewish honor. The heart is thankful to remember. By Mrs. Manya Siegelman and Mr. and Mrs. Deb Beerbaum. Mrs. Siegelman was born in Poland. She was in lagers, Suchitnu, Kosciuszko, Hazak, and liberated Czestochow. And I'm Polish here also. The 1,000-year-old culture and civilization that was created by European Jewry, the scores of synagogues that were burned, the Yiddish culture and language that was cherished by its people. The car, the day, remember. The fifth candle will be lit by Mr. and Mrs. Abraham Mora. Mrs. Charlotte Mora was born in Sosnovich, Poland. She was in Lagen, Greenberg, under Grossrosen. Mr. Abraham Mora was born in Radom, Poland. He was in Lagen, Buchenwald, and Auschwitz. For those few righteous Gentiles, and in particular Ralph Oliver, who despite the threat of death, did engage shelter and food for their Jewish neighbors, and shone as a beacon of humanity in the sea of inhumanity and indifference. The horror, the day, remember. Sixth candle will be lit by Mr. and Mrs. Zelik Podolsky, born in Vilbin, Poland. It was in Lodz Ghetto and Lager Czestochowa. For more than 1 million Jewish children who were murdered in cold blood by the German Nazis and the European collaborators. The car, gedenk, remember.
Millions of people, not knowing their fate, marched and were pushed to a barbed wire gate. Once inside, they were treated like cattle. For them it was an unsung battle. The weak died quickly along with the old. Some strong survived and their story was told. This horrible story of the extinction of 6 million Jews unhappily never made front page news. This happened during World War II, and it should be remembered by me and you. It's a frightful story, there is no doubt. And do we really know what it's all about? Remember the Holocaust, you've heard many say. Think of these people each and every day.
Our third generation, represented by Miss Erin Grant and Miss Marcy Shulman, two young ladies we're very proud of, will recite the poem, Mashallah the Partisan, words by the partisan poet Yitzhak Aron, the son of the Bachman, Marcy and Erin.
Shower. A very young boy and his little brother are naked. Terrified, they hug each other. Shivering, exhausted. They are powerless to avoid the heavy adult legs that press their faces. Unaware of their assassin, they are waiting for the shower to begin. Where is their dear father and mother, their baby sister and older brother? Will their family ever be together again? How many more helpless Jewish children and adults will the soldiers squeeze in while they wait for the shower to begin? They tell each other they must not cry. They try to talk about home, their rabbi, their school and friends in little town, their shul that was burned to the ground. They pass over seders and fun on Torah as they wait for the shower to begin. They hear the heavy metal doors close and shudder to hear the screams of those who know the shower they will receive. But the two children continue to believe until they gasp and gas seeps in and they feel the deadly shower begin. And their souls go to heaven as we cry. Why do lovely innocent children die? But we do not stop these horrible sins, and soon another evil shower begins. Scientific extermination and sanitation. Hurry, prepare the bodies for incineration. Desecrate all gentle, human, moral values, and clean the shower from blood of Jews. Now bring more men, women, and children. The shower is ready to begin again.
Holocaust. Adolf Hitler had many Jews killed. I'll make a bet that he was thrilled. He made the Jews leave all their possessions, their families, jobs, and their professions. Adolf Hitler was sick in the head. He took the innocents, soon they were dead. I hope these things won't happen again, but then again, that all depends. People today are of all different types, yellow, red, blacks, and white. It doesn't matter what religion or race, or heritage, or the color of your face. What Hitler did was oh so wrong. How could one man act that strong? Today there are still people just like Hitler, but make sure it's not you, mister. Please don't repeat the actions of this man. Soon we will have peace throughout the land. This poem, as you can see, is what the Holocaust means to me.
Our speaker at this time has appeared before us in previous years. He has brought us the message of the indomitable spirit of the Jewish people out of his own personal experience. A native of Lodz, Poland, he was imprisoned in the Lodz ghetto and then in Auschwitz and Dachau. After his liberation, he rebuilt his life and his family here in America and enjoyed a productive 40-year career in Jewish education. He is presently assistant to the editor of the Allgemeine Journal and a featured columnist, bringing to the written word the passion and the dedication that have infused his entire life. I am indeed privileged to present to you for his message my respected colleague and friend, Rabbi Zusha Marsa.
נמצא פה איתנו נציג ממשלת ישראל, אפרים טרי, ממלא מקום של הנציג הראשי באו"ם. לכבודו ולכבוד המדינה, מדינת ישראל שלנו, כמה מילים בעברית לפני שאני אתחיל באנגלית. טיטוס הרשע, עובד האלילים, הצית אש במקדש והחריב את מלכות יהודה. טוקוומדו, האינקוויזיטור הנוצרי, העמיד לפני היהודים בספרד את הברירה, המרת התם או גירושם. היהודים בחרו במקל הנדודים, מצאו מקלט בארצות קרובות ורחובות. ליל בכל הלילות, וזה אני הוגה דעות, מה יישמר משואה זו מעבר למשרפות לדורות הבאים של היהודים האחרים שלא היו פה, וליהודים כמוך, כמוני, מה נספר? To translate the more or less meaning of the few words in Hebrew, the synopsis is, what shall we tell? What shall we talk about? Will we remember? Can we make sure that it will never be forgotten? I wrote a few words. I had to type because I want to make sure that nothing is lost. This is the beginning of my message. Over 40 years in America, yet our memories go back to the Nazi gas chambers and to the ghettos. Closing a distance, time cannot measure. Like so many survivors, we came to America with hopes and with memories. We came to make a home and to rebuild a future. It was difficult and lonely. We couldn't understand the people we met, and they couldn't understand us. Everything was strange. But somehow, we made it. It is not a unique story. Today, survivors are found in every state of the Union, in every corner of the globe, in every walk of life. Rabbis and businessmen, educators and artists, musicians and attorneys, physicians, writers and professors, and even famous philanthropists who support generously Jewish heritage, Jewish living, and Jewish charity. Ladies and gentlemen, today is a tough day for me, and I'll be very straight. 47 years ago, April 29, it was me amongst others, thousands of them, who were on April 29, 1945, they became free people in Dachau by the American soldiers. Today was the day. That's the outside. Tomorrow's another day that brings back memories, bad ones, memories of danger, memories of destruction, memories of fear and of fire. April 30, tomorrow, 1940. And I heard the name that there was a survivor from Lodz, the city I come from. April 30, 1940, ghetto of Lodz was sealed. Anyone who tried to run away was killed immediately. It is not a question of just stories. Holocaust